Contos de terror. Grandes livros. Edgar Allan Poe mergulhou em sua própria alma para escrever sobre o terror que afeta cada um de nós. Ele criou uma Bíblia do medo.
Fear is the great black cup of coffee to human existence. If you have fear, then you're aware that you are vulnerable and you can do something about it, perhaps. If you don't have fear, you're going to walk out in front of the saber-toothed tiger or in front of the Mack truck and not be around for very long.
Edgar Allan Poe is the most psychological writer that ever lived. Yeah, there is nothing of his that he wrote that doesn't have a chord in you somewhere. He has a tuning fork and he hits it and your whole soul vibrates.
Os contos de terror de Edgar Allan Poe surgiram a partir de uma vida repleta de tragédias. Ele usou seu sofrimento para criar algumas das maiores histórias de terror que já foram escritas. Um de seus contos mais vigorosos é O Poço e o Pêndulo. É o maior retrato que Poe fez do terror mortal. Um preso político da Inquisição está sozinho num calabouço. Ele está abalado e confuso. Sua morte é certa. Como ele vai morrer, ainda não se sabe.
The terror in the Pit and the Pendulum is, as he says, not that there might be something to see, but that there is nothing to see. And I think that the Pit and the Pendulum is so awful and such a great representation of utter terror because it is a portrayal of what would happen if you had no stimulation, nothing. Then your mind would take over, and the mind would create monsters far more gruesome than anything that the Inquisition could possibly invent.
A vítima vai tateando na escuridão e cai. Um poço insondável, repleto de horrores inimagináveis, está à sua frente. Ele mal consegue se segurar. A vítima toma a água de um jarro e mergulha em profundo torpor. Quando desperta, ele está amarrado dos pés à cabeça. Bem acima dele oscila um pêndulo, com seu arco de aço muito afiado. A cada oscilação, ele desce lentamente. E a lâmina vai ficando mais perto de seu coração.
this overwhelming force coming towards the body, a blade. Blades are so frequently used in horror films because they are specifically about opening that little thin case of the human body. It is also a vast or a huge symbol of a clock itself. So it's like your own death moving towards you, which is something we all are aware of.
Com a lâmina a poucos centímetros de seu tórax, a vítima encontra uma esperança. Ela aparece na forma de um rato. Ele esfrega pedaços de comida nas cordas que o prendem. Os ratos começam a roer. Os ratos roem as cordas. Ele está livre. Mas antes mesmo que recupere o fôlego, a cela se cobre de um brilho aterrorizante. As paredes e o teto estão em chamas. E ele é obrigado a ir na direção do poço. Quando já não há esperanças, o fogo nas paredes retrocede. O prisioneiro é libertado. Seus algozes foram derrotados.
This story expresses in the most graphic and direct ways the most profound human anxieties about all of those forces that threaten us that could possibly lead to our annihilation. It's a cornucopia of frightening images. In some ways, it's a sort of tour de force. It seems as if Poe, in this one story, wants to pull out all the stops to see if he can invent or bring into play as many frightening devices as he can possibly imagine. It's a psychic overload.
No começo do século XIX, Poe era um conceituado crítico e editor. Ele escrevia romance, poesia, ficção científica e sátira, e criou uma história de investigação. Mas hoje, Poe é muito lembrado como o autor de grandes histórias de terror.
Do you know where you are, Bartholomew? You are about to enter hell.
Histórias de medo e terror fazem parte da humanidade desde que começamos a escrever. Quando Adão e Eva comeram a maçã proibida no livro do Gênesis, seus olhos se abriram para o bem e para o mal. Adão disse: "Eu tive medo." O medo é a mais básica das emoções humanas.
I've many times been asked, why would anybody pay money to go and be made afraid? And my answer is, they pay money because they are afraid. And they're going to have that fear put into a story and shared with a lot of other people in the same place.
Os contos de Poe foram lidos por milhões de pessoas, mas seus temores eram muito pessoais. Edgar Poe nasceu em 1809, filho de David e Eliza Poe, atores mambembes. Sua mãe era uma das atrizes mais famosas dos palcos norte-americanos, mas a família vivia na pobreza. Quando Edgar tinha 2 anos, seu pai, alcoólatra, abandonou a família.
In Poe's case, both his parents died early, and his father was an alcoholic and a failure, setting up a kind of pattern that Poe deliberately or unintentionally would follow throughout his life. And the mother became this kind of, lost figure. She dies of TB. And then she just kind of fades out of Poe's life, and she becomes this sort of ghost, strong ghost in his memory.
O jovem Edgar foi recebido por um rico escocês que morava em Richmond, Virgínia, John Allen. Era uma nova vida, repleta de facilidades. A senhora Frances Allen, que não tinha filhos, recebeu o menino como seu filho.
The Allens never formally adopted Poe, and he resented that. He always wanted to take over the Allen name. He never felt comfortable with it. We call him Edgar Allan Poe, but he only went so far as to call himself Edgar A. Poe. I mean, suggesting that he both wanted the name, but really felt that it didn't belong to him. It was only after Poe's death that he began to be called Edgar Allan Poe.
O relacionamento de Poe com sua mãe adotiva, Frances, era bem próximo, mas durou pouco. Quando Edgar tinha 20 anos, ela morreu de tuberculose.
Poe began to see himself as a kind of cursed figure, someone who actually brought misfortune on especially women he loved. And all of this produces in Poe's work a kind of brooding awareness of mortality.
Desde o começo, a morte assombrou Poe. Sua vida levou-o a entender as emoções humanas mais básicas, e seu texto nos obriga a enfrentá-las sem rodeios. Assim como Poe, Vendela Zane entende a natureza do medo. Assim como Poe, ela maneja bem o terror.
I think what scares people the most is not knowing what's coming next. People are always wondering, especially people who come to me who are always in control. They want to know, they're usually used to know it, and they'll flinch or jump when I go to touch them or something, and it's like, calm down, relax. And then that's when I usually add on a blindfold or something like that so they can relax and kind of go into their own little world.
I think a lot of the best horror literature is about exploring our taboos and exploring why they are our taboos, trying to explore what they mean to us and why they disturb us so deeply. And I think Poe did that as well as any writer who's ever lived.
Edgar Allan Poe tinha conhecimento profundo do que era proibido. Ele chegou a construir sua própria casa de horrores. Trata-se do Solar de Usher e é repleta de segredos tenebrosos. O conto A Queda do Solar de Usher começa com o narrador chegando a uma mansão sombria. Ele foi chamado por seu amigo de infância, Roderick Usher.
During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I found myself within view of the melancholy house of Usher.
Ele chega à casa sem saber ao certo o que esperar. Ele encontra o amigo, Roderick Usher morrendo de uma doença misteriosa. A irmã gêmea de Roderick, Madeleine, também está infectada.
Her decease, he said with a bitterness which I can never forget, would leave him, the last of the ancient race of the Ushers.
Clearly, Poe is playing with the suggestion of incest and the fact that they represent an ancient line that has dwindled down to 2 surviving members, suggests that this is a family that has been victimized by its own incestuous patterns of relationship.
The passion that Roderick feels for Madeleine goes far beyond the merely ideal. There's a secret which he's trying so hard to keep his mind off of. There's a kind of disease eating away at him.
Os temores mais profundos de Roderick se concretizam quando Madeleine morre.
You have Roderick Usher dreading the death of his sister, and then when it does occur, or seems to occur, he doesn't know what to do about it. Should he bury her out in the cemetery? Should he keep her body within the house? Should he put her in a coffin or do something less drastic? He eventually decides, oddly enough, to keep the body within the house on the off chance that she's not really dead. But then he also decides to screw down the lid of the coffin. An ambiguous gesture, to be sure, which I think perfectly represents the conflicted state in which Roderick himself is in.
Embora sua irmã esteja morta, Usher está com muito medo. Sem conseguir dormir, ele fica com seu convidado até bem tarde. Lá fora, cai uma tempestade. Um som agudo ecoa pela casa. Uma porta de ferro se abre. Usher está apavorado.
Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dared not speak. We have put her living in the tomb.
A porta se abre. É Madeleine.
She seems to be summoned forth not so much by her own energy or will for revenge as by Usher's own apprehensions. It's as if he draws her forth from his own unconscious.
With a low, moaning cry, she bore him to the floor a corpse and a victim to the terrors he anticipated.
The end is this terrible apocalyptic embrace where the 2 of them together fall. And for the narrator, it is also the final bursting out of the pollution that was only hidden at the beginning.
A queda do solar de Usher fez Poe ser reconhecido como um escritor respeitável. Mas nada mais que isso. E um acontecimento trágico o faria sofrer ainda mais. Westminster Hall, Baltimore, Maryland. Aniversário do nascimento de Edgar Allan Poe. Todo ano, desde 1949, um homem solitário e misterioso aparece aqui. Deixa 3 rosas vermelhas e uma garrafa de conhaque francês no túmulo de Poe. E desaparece noite adentro.
Over the years, a group of us spend the night hidden away in the Westminster graveyard, observing this individual. Roses and cognac on his grave since 1949, and Poe's been dead since 1849. So obviously this person in some way feels an affinity for Poe. Maybe he can relate to Poe's suffering, or maybe this person is related to the Poe family. We don't know, but actually I'm glad that he is doing it, because I'm touched by the tribute too.
É uma homenagem comovente a um homem cuja história pessoal é tão terrível ou até mais terrível que as histórias que ele escreveu. Aos 27 anos de idade, abandonado pelo pai, desolado pela morte da mãe biológica e da mãe adotiva, Edgar Allan Poe constituiu sua própria família. Quando morava com a tia em Baltimore, apaixonou-se pela filha dela, Virginia, que era sua prima. Quando eles se casaram, ela estava com 13 anos.
These 3 people really, they clung to each other, orphans in a storm. In a way, I think it was very lucky for them to have each other. He was looking certainly for a family to have, which he never had. And it was probably a very good relationship in its way for all of them.
Poe trabalhava como crítico e editor para sustentar sua nova família. Mas suas críticas muito ácidas e seu comportamento inconstante causavam uma crise após a outra.
Poe destroyed his own chances again and again for literary opportunities through bad luck, through poor judgment, through unfortunate timing. Again and again in Poe's life, there are moments when Poe seems just on the verge of becoming a truly successful writer in an American sense, and the bottom falls out.
Poe usa suas últimas economias para comprar um piano para sua adorada esposa, Virginia. Um dia, enquanto ela tocava para o marido e para a mãe, começou a tossir. Era o primeiro sinal da doença que perseguiu Poe em toda a sua vida e afetou todas as pessoas que ele amava. Virginia estava com tuberculose.
The coughing and this kind of rasping, gasping for breath. There's sort of this kind of, trying to get a breath. When Catherine Mansfield describes it very, very vividly in her journal, I sip water, I sip, I gasp, I sip, I gasp, and every deep breath is like a knife going through my throat. Really puts it to you.
Nos 5 anos seguintes, Virginia foi definhando com a temida doença. O único bom momento foi um poema que Poe escreveu enquanto Virginia estava muito doente. O Coro. É um poema sobre a obsessão de um homem que vê seu amor morrer. Foi um sucesso imediato.
The Raven was the first really big hit. It was something like, the Beatles for a song or something. It was enormously catchy. People apparently loved the way it sounded and the way it tripped along, and started imitating it all over the place.
Hoje, o nome de Poe tornou-se sinônimo de O Corvo. Mas nem esse grande sucesso de Poe conseguiu salvá-lo da pobreza.
He struggled with poverty throughout his adult life. It's amazing how many of Poe's letters actually include requests for money. He did this again and again to friends. I'm needing $25. Can you possibly spare me some money?
So you keep saying, Poe, don't do it again, hold back. Be good, be restrained, be reasonable, be mature, be sensible, be businesslike, be practical, be rational. And there's simply no controlling the guy. And it's a very, very sad story.
Was he paranoid? Possibly. Was he melancholy? Absolutely. Did he have a streak of perverseness? No question about it.
Poe would have made a wonderful client because he was already thinking of everything. I wouldn't have to do anything. He's already creating everything in his mind.
Enquanto a morte ia assombrando seus passos, Poe continuava explorando seu medo mais profundo. O medo de perder uma pessoa amada. Ligeia é a história do amor obsessivo de um homem por uma mulher e seu medo desesperado de que ela morra e desapareça para sempre. Ligeia é bonita, é inteligente e é bondosa.
In beauty of face, no maiden ever equaled her. It was the radiance of an opium dream, an airy and spirit-lifting vision. She came and departed like a shadow.
Mas a perfeição de Ligeia não duraria muito tempo.
The pale fingers became of the transparent waxen hue of the grave.
Ligeia morre e seu marido fica arrasado. Ele abandona o mundo dos sãos e entra no mundo de um viciado em ópio. Em meio à loucura causada pelo sofrimento, ele se casa com outra mulher. Seu nome é Rowena, e ela é tudo que Ligeia não
I loathed her with a hatred belonging more to demon than to man. My memory flew back to Ligeia, the beloved, the entombed.
Who is Rowena? Rowena is actually this blonde-haired, beautiful cipher. She's sold by her parents. So you have a white lady who's actually sold into bondage to this insane narrator by her parents. And why does he hate her so?
Assim como aconteceu com Ligeia, Rowena é acometida por uma doença misteriosa. Ela é assombrada por sinais estranhos, barulhos, passos, sombras. Seu marido vê 3 gotas de cor vermelha caindo em sua taça de vinho. Ele está alucinando. Será que ele a envenenou? Rowena está assustada. Seu marido está num transe profundo de ópio. A realidade e a fantasia se misturam. Rowena bebe daquela taça. Com o marido ao seu lado, ela morre.
I sat alone with her shrouded body in that fantastic chamber which had received her as my bride. Wild visions, opium engendered, flitted, shadow-like before me.
No meio da noite, ele ouve um soluço baixo e suave. Rowena voltou a viver.
I felt my heart cease to beat, my limbs grow rigid. Rowena still lived.
Mesmo assim, pouco depois, todos os sinais de vida desaparecem. Ela está morta. Quando amanhece, o corpo de Rowena se mexe uma vez e mais outra. Será que seus cabelos escureceram? Os olhos azuis ficaram castanhos? Ligeia voltou.
These are the full and the black and the wild eyes of my lost love, of the Lady Ligeia.
Seu primeiro e único amor acaba de voltar à sepultura.
So you're living in a Poe universe where everything is the undead, the living who are both dead and more living, in fact, after death than they were probably in life. That is a terror.
Para Poe, o terror absoluto era saber que os mortos nunca voltam da sepultura. Em breve ele enfrentaria esse terror pela última vez. No dia 30 de janeiro de 1847, a mulher de Edgar Allan Poe, Virginia, morreu de tuberculose. Ela estava com 24 anos. Virginia morreu com a mesma idade e da mesma doença da mãe de Poe. Poe escreveu:
When I found one in the death of my wife.
No fim, a reação de Poe diante da morte da esposa foi beber.
And he drank in this strange way, very rare. He would go to a bar and he just drink one drink and then another and then another and another, almost like a man coming out of a desert, not having enough water and just having to throw down all these glasses of water one after the other to finally finish. And of course, after one or two or three of these glasses where other harder drinkers could survive, Poe was a falling down drunk.
He might have abused substances, you know. He liked to push the envelope. You know, he was kind of the Kurt Cobain of the day in a way. He pushed against all the restrictions, and I think he also was probably dealing with his own personal demons in a very real way.
Em seu último ano de vida, Poe teve os primeiros ataques de delirium tremens, alucinações causadas pelo consumo excessivo de álcool. Numa das alucinações, ele viu sua sogra sendo mutilada. Poe descreveu a cena que viu.
Saw off her feet at the ankles, then her legs to the knees, her thighs at the hips.
They sound like the horrors in Poe's stories. And where do they come from? They came from Poe's own personal experience. And it's the compound, which I call this kind of explosive chemical mixture of the literary and the personal, which creates this incredibly powerful effect, which can really be scary. I don't mean to say that Poe destroyed himself in order to find something to write about, but looking at the same thing from another point of view, that he used the destructive experience afterwards to bring a kind of extra charge of power into the stories.
Dos contos mais famosos de Poe, O Coração Denunciador, parece refletir suas alucinações aterrorizantes. O conto começa com um jovem que cuidava de um senhor idoso. Ele é obcecado pelo olho desse senhor.
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man.
I think what sets The Telltale Heart apart and makes it particularly chilling is the way that Poe stages the story from the perspective of the killer and allows us to see that there's an absolute disconnect here between the narrator's intelligence, his intellect, his ability to organize a crime, and any human sentiment that might accompany the action. There is none.
Noite após noite, ele entra no quarto do velho, que está de olho fechado.
And so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye.
Uma noite, quando ele abre a porta, barulho faz o velho acordar.
I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror.
Ele ouve as batidas do coração do velho. Ele ouve o seu terror.
It might be incredibly satisfying to smash that brick into somebody's head or shove that knife into somebody's heart or whatever, but I think that if you're sane, then immediately after that liberating sense of freedom and of having vented your rage, or for whatever reason you did it, you're going to have that panic of, my God, I've crossed this line, this taboo that I can never go back.
I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. The old man was dead. Yes, he was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more.
Being inside the head of a killer is not alien to me at all. I think that I understand those urges, and I have to admit that if I wasn't writing about this stuff, I sometimes think I might very well be doing it. So I think it's a good thing that I have this outlet, and I think Poe probably needed that as well.
O jovem vai mutilando o velho. Depois, enterra as diversas partes do corpo sob o piso do quarto.
You certainly get the idea that that guy knows what he's doing. It's difficult to dismember a body. It's difficult to pierce the skin of a body. Even the skin is strong, the body is strong, the body is really well put together. You have to know where to cut, not to just make a total mess of it.
Ele limpa todo o sangue das mãos e das roupas. No meio da noite, alguns policiais batem à porta. O grito foi ouvido. A polícia está investigando. O jovem oferece um chá aos policiais que vão sentar sobre o piso onde ele enterrou o corpo do velho.
I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own, in a dream. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease.
It's a fascinating moment at the end of The Telltale Heart when the narrator is inviting the police inside and proceeds to sit down with them and very calmly discuss the situation. He feels as if he has nothing to lose, and in fact, there's a kind of quiet triumph that he enjoys there. He believes he's committed the perfect crime, and he flaunts it by behaving in this completely casual way with the police.
Mas pouco depois, sua cabeça começa a doer. Ele ouve um zumbido no ouvido.
It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton, and yet the officers heard it not. Why would they not be gone?
The heart is one of the few things about our body that announces that it's there. Mostly we're not really aware too much of what our interior is up to. The heart, you can hear, you can feel it. It's like a clock. I think there's something very, very primal about the beating of the heart. We know that it makes a difference between our being alive or dead.
Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they hear. They suspected. They knew.
There's this perverse quality again and again in Poe's tales. It's no good to create a perfect crime if someone doesn't know about it. There's something within that has to get out.
I felt that I must scream or die. Villains, I shrieked. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.
And I think that's the terror that Poe's tales also leave us with, that no matter what you do, once you have seen or thought something horrible, there will always be ways for it to return. Things never die in Poe.
Em 1848, Edgar Allan Poe tentou se matar, consumindo uma dose quase letal de ópio. Ele passou por momentos alucinantes de embriaguez, mas sempre continuou escrevendo.
He became increasingly desperate. I mean, after Virginia died, the desperation really set in. I mean, when the family that he had finally found broke up all over again, then he sort of went crazy.
I think he had just about a blueprint for being unhappy and creative and crazy and miserable.
Em 1849, Poe saiu de Richmond e foi para Nova York. Em Baltimore, ele parou e bebeu até esquecer. Por 6 dias, Poe desapareceu misteriosamente. Quando ele reapareceu, estava delirante e profundamente doente. Por 3 dias, Poe ficou numa cama de hospital em Baltimore, perdendo e recobrando a consciência. Por fim, totalmente fatigado, ele ficou quieto e pareceu dormir por um momento. Então olhou para cima e disse: Senhor, ajude esta pobre alma. E morreu. Ele estava com 40 anos.
Edgar Allan Poe was not ahead of his time. He was of all time. We write what we write. We are born genetically to do what we do. God puts the genetics in your body. If you're smart, you use them. So there's no time to that. He was born to be Edgar Allan Poe.
An artist doesn't feel anything different from the rest of us except he or she can articulate it. It's like we're all living with, in a world of fireflies, and we admire them and we love to have one, but certain people can pluck them out of the air and put them in the bottle for us. And I think Poe did it for that sort of sphere of mental anguish and longing and kind of voluptuous fears and jealousies and hatreds and everything else that he caught,
Versão brasileira Clone.